there, Professor Sir John Curtice, who no doubt has drilled into these numbers. So let me ask this question from a Conservative perspective, John. If you were advising the Conservatives on what to do next, if you were looking at this poll, what could you highlight that might be of some encouragement? Is there anything?
Well, this poll doesn't give us much more information than it does about voting intention, though Lord Ashcroft's poll gives rather more deeper information. But let's take a couple of points away from particularly Lord Ashcroft's poll. Number one is that the attempt to stop the boats is certainly something that Conservative voters, around just over a third of them, regard as the most important of Mr. Sunak's priorities. But frankly, virtually nobody else does. So it's a very distinctive policy insofar as it appeals to Conservative voters, but hardly to anybody else. But moving more broadly to the government's difficulty is how it's going to persuade voters that its management of the economy and its stewardship of taxation over the course of the last 4 years is to be defended. Well, probably vital message for the Conservative Party from the Lord Ashcroft's poll, and it chimes with lots of other polling, is if you ask voters to choose between tax cuts, which the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has been talking further about at the Davos Economic Summit, as saying that he wants to introduce more of in the spring. He's already had one cut before Christmas. The voters faced with that choice think that it's more important to sort out our public services than it is to reduce tax cuts. So, from this, in other words, what you should draw the message is that while the Conservative Party, in focusing on immigration, are focusing on an issue that is indeed of a particular concern for many of their supporters, though whether it dissuades them from voting Conservative if the stops are not boats are not stopped, that's another matter. But that, so far as appealing to the wider electorate is concerned, and the Conservatives do need to appeal well beyond the 25% or so that on average in the opinion polls the Conservatives have, then the truth is they perhaps rethink some of the strategy on which they're currently embarked.
I'm smiling because I'm wondering what Lenny Chen makes of that. No tax cuts, more on public services. That's the antithesis of a Republican standpoint at the moment in Washington. I mean, they used to say, John, that the path to Downing Street, since we've got Kezia with us, the path to Downing Street for Labour ran through the Scottish constituencies. Is that still the case? Do they still need a renewal of Scottish Labour to command a majority?
Not necessarily. I mean, today's 27-point lead in YouGov's poll, forget it. I mean, the Labour Party doesn't need a single extra seat in Scotland to get a very substantial majority, given those kinds of figures. But even if you take the average of the opinion polls at around 19 points, that would be enough to deliver a Labour majority simply within England and Wales. Of course, what the Labour Party is concerned about is that maybe their lead in the opinion polls will be narrower by the time of the election, and that therefore picking up some seats in Scotland will otherwise ease a path that might, in the absence of those seats, result in a minority Labour administration rather than a majority one. But the truth is, if Labour retain the kind of poll lead they have had ever since the demise of Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, back in October 2022, then what happens in Scotland will end up proving to be irrelevant.